So I wanted to start out with this. I want to have everybody repeat after me. Perspective is everything. Let me say that again. Perspective is everything. One more time. Perspective is everything. All right. Thanks, TJ, for the extra motivation there. So here's my question. Why is it that we view the good stuff as a blessing and the bad stuff as a curse? Let me ask it again. Why is it that we view the good stuff as a blessing and the bad stuff as a curse? I remember back in 1999, that's so long. Isn't it crazy to think that that's 25 years ago? That's bonkers. I'm so old now that the stuff I listen to is on the oldie station. You know, that's how old I am. But back in 1999, I purchased a used but new to me 300E Mercedes-Benz forest green with the leather seats inside. And I remember when I drove that car, like you know how you drive, but then when you get that new car, right? Don't you drive a little bit differently? You know, don't you put the seat back a little bit further? You know, and don't you smile a little bit differently? You know, as you're driving, as you're rolling through the neighborhood and everything like that. And although my Mercedes was 9 years old, it was new to me, and I was so excited about that car. And so, have you ever had that? Have you ever had something that you were excited about? Maybe it was clothes. You know, it was back to school week. You know, and so you went back to school shopping. And so you were like, let me show off my kicks, man, because, you know, I'm ready for school, like, you know, that kind of thing. Or maybe, again, you got a car. Maybe you got a house. Maybe you got a job. But that thing that you considered like a blessing, you were so excited about. And you maybe even have considered that thing a blessing, kind of like a life-changing thing that you experienced. So let me have you do this. Turn to your neighbor and tell your neighbor of something that was like that for you, whether it was a car, a house, you know, clothes, whatever it might be. Turn to your neighbor and tell them something that was an exciting thing for you. All right, so what were some of the things that came out? What's that? Everything. He's happy about it. Oh. You're what? Oh, matching jacket and pants. FUBU. Oh, FUBU. For us, by us. All right. Anyone else? Oh. Is that an invitation? Oh, okay. That's what I was checking, make sure. Because, you know, Jacob and I will be hanging today. Anyone else? Anything that was? Oh, wow, she went deep. My kids, you know, as he sits next to her and he towers over all of us. But here's the thing that's really interesting. And again, celebrate those things. I'm not against them. But I do want to say this, though. A few years later, I'm driving that same Mercedes 300E, and I'm like, I got to get rid of this thing. This thing sucks. Check engine lights on, window won't go down, drive with a trash bag in my window. This thing's, right? Because here's the reality, you can see this right on the screen. Everything that makes you feel like you've arrived breaks down. Have you noticed? Everything that makes you feel like you've arrived breaks down. And even relationships. Like, the breaks down does not necessarily mean the relationship is ended, but it's going through some difficult times, and there's a lot of prayer involved, and I don't know kind of thing. But yeah, so everything that makes you feel like you have arrived breaks down. Years ago, there was a guy named John Mayer. Anyone who knows who John Mayer is? Any John Mayer fans out there? Okay. So John Mayer had this song called Gravity. And, oh, yeah, people, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's this part where he says something in Gravity that I think is really powerful. And you can see the lyric right on the screen. He says, oh, twice as much ain't twice as good and can't sustain like one half could. It's wanting more that's going to send me to my knees. Right? And TJ singing it right there, for you guys. And so, when you look at it from that perspective, I think that is so true. More never satisfies, right? But I adjusted the last lyric, and so you can see the adjustment that I made on the screen as well. And that is, it's wanting more and keeping what I have that's going to drive me to my knees or send me to my knees. It's wanting more and keeping what I have. Because again, there's that fear, like what if I lose it? There's a danger that we have when we get comfortable. There is. And part of the danger of being comfortable is the fear of losing it. What if there's a threat, and what if I lose it? What if it falls apart? What if? So then, how many of us live our lives driven by what if? What if? And unfortunately, for some of us, that what if comes to fruition. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But this series that we've been doing is called Living the Dream. And so what we're doing in this series is we've been looking at the life of a guy named Joseph and looking at how Joseph navigated some of the most difficult moments in his life. And for those of you that may not have been here for this series, I am going to give a quick summary, summary? One of those. But I'm going to give a quick summary of the series. But I do want to encourage you with this. If you've missed any of this series, you can go to our website, click the link that says Services on Demand, click the thumbnail for the series, and you can go back and you can watch any one or all of the messages. It's completely up to you. But in looking at the life of Joseph, what happens is Joseph gets a dream. And he begins to share that dream. And let's just say his dream is not received very well. And so as a result of that, his brothers sell him into slavery. And we talked about the fact that God was with Joseph in his slavery. And we have to remember that God is with us when we go through our trials as well. But then what happens is the slave master's wife takes a liking to Joseph. And she's like, what, kind of thing. And she wanted to, what, with Joseph. And Joseph was like, no, Joseph left the building. So then what happens is she falsely accuses Joseph of trying to take advantage of her, and the result is Joseph is thrown into prison. So Joseph goes from bad to worse. And so we talked about how sometimes we can pray for things and it does go from bad to worse, but we have to remember that God is with us. And so the scriptures talk about the fact that God, not only was God was with Joseph in his worst, it also says God's faithful love was with Joseph in his worst. And so we have to remember that too, that just because things look bad does not mean that he does not love me. And just because things aren't working out the way that I want them to does not mean that he does not love me. His love is faithful, no matter how easy or no matter how difficult the things may be. So then what happens is things work out. Joseph is pulled out of prison, and he goes from pauper to prince. So he goes in that way. So sorry. So last chance I get to tell that joke, so I want to do it again. So with that in mind, here's the thing that we talked about, and this is so important. Because here's the thing, if you can't remember or if you can't notice that God is with you in your mess, then you won't recognize when he's starting to bless. And sometimes what you'll even do is you'll take credit for it. I worked hard. I pulled myself up. We'll take credit for even the work that God is doing. So it's important for us to remember that. And then what we talked about last week, and really this week is a continuation of last week, is we looked at the mindset of Joseph and the way that he defined and the way that he looked at his problems. Like I said, we talked about perspective is everything. And the perspective that Joseph has, well, it's uncanny. It's amazing. It's phenomenal. And I think if we're willing to begin to embrace that, then maybe what we'll do is we'll begin to look at the things that we might consider curses, the things that we might consider horrible or bad in our lives. Maybe we'll begin to look at them a little bit differently. Now, I want to make this really clear. I'm not saying that we'll be happy for the curses. We'll be happy for, hey, how are you doing? Oh, man, I'm doing great. My life sucks. You know? So I'm not saying that we'll go to that extreme. Matter of fact, we're going to look at Joseph. We're going to see some things that are really incredible about him. But I'll tell you, today's message is motivated by the devotionals that we read going through as we've gone through this series. So I'll tell you that the rest of this message is inspired by some of the devotionals that we read. And I'll maybe share some quotes from those devotionals, because I think that those statements were really powerful when it talks about looking at our perspective. But again, like I said before, having a right perspective about your problems does not necessarily mean you don't feel frustrated or irritated or upset or that you emotionally check out. It doesn't mean that. Matter of fact, we're going to read some verses right now, several verses in a row, and I want you to see what those verses all have in common. So Genesis 43:30. Then Joseph hurried from the room because he was overcome with emotion for his brother. He went into his private room where he broke down and wept. Genesis 45:15. Then Joseph kissed each of his brothers and wept over them, and after that they began talking freely with him. Genesis 46:29. Joseph prepared his chariot and traveled to Goshen to meet his father Jacob. When Joseph arrived, he embraced his father and wept, holding him for a long time. Genesis 50, verse 1. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Genesis 50:17. To say to you, please forgive your brothers for the great wrong they did to you, for their sin in treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of God, your Father, beg you to forgive our sin. And when Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. So what's the commonality that we see there? He did what? He wept. He wept. So I just want to make it really clear that going through stuff doesn't mean that you don't feel stuff. And even if you have the right perspective, it doesn't mean that you don't feel it. It doesn't mean that you don't process it. It doesn't mean that you don't work through it. It doesn't mean that you try to figure it out and that you are praying and you're talking to God about it. It doesn't mean that you're not confused. It doesn't mean that you're not disappointed. It doesn't mean that you don't feel let down. It doesn't mean any of those things. Just because you have the right perspective, you're still human. And you'll still have those feelings to process and work through. So Joseph did. Joseph wept when he saw his brothers for the first time, because now he's confronted with what his brothers did to him and now having to process that. He wept when he was able to reveal to his brothers who he was and the moment that he had gotten to. He wept when he saw his dad, because he hadn't seen his dad in years, and probably actually in decades. So he wept. He wept when his father died. He wept when he realized that his brothers still were afraid that he was holding hostility and bitterness toward them. So he wept. It's healthy to process. Our Savior, when he was, the night before he was arrested and he's processing what's about to happen, the scriptures say that he was so stressed out that he was sweating blood. I've never been that stressed out. I don't know if you have. I've never been that stressed out, but that's stressed out. But he still processed it. He still had the hope. He knew what was going to happen, but he's still stressed out. And there's even one point where he said again, Father, if it's possible, take this bitter cup from me. In other words, I don't want to go through this. I don't want to deal with this pain, knowing what's coming. So he did that. And then also, when he's on the cross, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani is what he cries out. My God, why have you forsaken me? And some people believe that in that moment, Jesus, although he was intimate with his Father for the first time, he felt the distance from his Father, and he felt the emotion of that. He felt the emotion of that. So I just want to let you know that having the right perspective, because I think sometimes we're taught messages that get that confused, right? We're taught messages like, trust God, believe in God, hallelujah, and no matter what it is that I go through, I have a hallelujah Jesus, and I push, which stands for pray until something happens, right? But I also want us to be real as well. And we talked about this actually in the series before this one. So I want to encourage you to go back and watch those as well. Why does life suck sometimes? We talked about processing and navigating those things. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I do want to say this, and this is really important for us to understand, and that is that pain is a part of our growth process. Pain is a part of our growth process. And so if we never learn how to navigate pain well, then the consequence of that is we never grow. We stay stunted. And come on, aren't there some people that you know that you're like, bro, you're 60. Like you should have a different perspective at this point. You're 50, you're 40, you're 30. You should have a different perspective at this point. But it boils down to how we navigate pain. And do we use pain as a springboard for growth and for development? And so I spent a lot of time talking about this, so I'm not going to camp out there too much. But I do want to say this, and this is a principle if we're balancing things in a healthy way, and that is the feeling of loss does not disappear just because we understand why the loss occurred. That was one of the things that was said in our devotional. I thought, ooh, that's good. I'm going to use that one. So the feeling of loss does not disappear just because I understand why the loss occurred. I still feel it. And again, part of that is normal as we're going through as well. But here's the thing, and this is really important. What's the difference, though? What is the difference between someone who is stuck compared to someone who moves forward? Because both feel the pain, don't they? We both have to navigate our pain. We both have to navigate it. So what's the difference between someone who gets stuck and someone who moves on? That's why I wanted to spend this last message going back and looking at Joseph once again. Because I think when we look at it from Joseph's perspective, it's massive. It's huge if we're truly able to understand that. So in Genesis chapter 41, verses 50 and 52, it says, during this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family. Verse 52, Joseph named his second son Ephraim. He said, God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief. Now, we read this passage last week, and I just kind of wanted to hit it again because one of the things that we said last week is basically what we rehearse is what we become. And so if we constantly rehearse the pain of what it is that we're going through and we're stuck in our pain, then we become people who are stuck compared to if we rehearse the other side of it. So here's the idea is Joseph names his first son Manasseh, which basically means I moved on. I have moved on. When it comes to my pain, my difficulty, my hardship, I have moved on. And then he names his second son Ephraim, which basically means that my pain did not have the final say. I have moved on. My pain did not have the final say. So I have moved on. Hey, I have moved on. Go wash the dishes. You know, I have moved on. Hey, my pain is the final say. Stop hitting your brother. You know, but every time he would say their name, it was a reminder of this is my process. This is what I'm thinking. I'm not going to rehearse my pain. I'm going to rehearse my hope. And so that's the challenge that we need to be able to implement and place into our lives as well, because your outcome is dictated by what it is that you rehearse. And here's the thing that's really important too. What you rehearse becomes what you believe. And what you believe becomes rooted, and that becomes what drives you. So if you rehearse your pain, then the lies of your pain becomes what you believe. And that lie drives you. Compared to if you rehearse the hope, the truth of God working in your life, the truth of what God reveals, then also what that does is that becomes rooted in your belief system, and now your belief system becomes driven by faith. So it's important for you to take a moment to really begin to think about that. And maybe even ask yourself, when it comes to pain, what do I rehearse? Do I rehearse my pain, or do I rehearse my hope? Do I rehearse because, you know, the reality is some of us, we're stuck. We're stuck. And I'm going to talk about the costs in my own life in a minute about why being stuck hinders me. But what we learned from Joseph is that when it comes to being able to navigate these elements, it's his mindset that allows him to be able to overcome. It's his mindset that allows him to be able to forgive his brothers. It is his mindset that allows him, and again, we're digging into what that mindset is. And so part of that mindset is to understand, and this is really important too, that pain causes us to grow in ways that good times never can. Pain causes us to grow in ways that good times never can. But here's the thing. When we're in pain, all we want are what? The good times. When we're in pain, give me the good times. Hope for the good. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'd like this pain to stop. Nothing wrong with that. But again, what happens is if we get stuck in a situation where we never process our pain, never process what we can learn from it, we become more stuck and bound by what it is that we believe. And then here's the thing, and this is important. I'm a different person because of my pain. I'm actually a better minister because of my pain. I'm a better friend because of my pain. I'm a better Christian because of my pain. I have the ability now to have patience when someone is stuck in a debilitating sin. Why? Because that was me at one point. I have compassion when someone is in a situation where they just feel stuck, because I was at that point. I have learned that sometimes the best thing to do when someone is going through something is just shut up. Why? Because there are times when people gave me words of encouragement, I wanted to punch them in the mouth. I mean, wanted to. I never did. Didn't follow through. But it was just such an idiotic statement that, that instead of bringing me hope, it just brought me annoyance. But if I didn't go through pain, I wouldn't know that. I have learned also to be able to say, I don't know. When someone has more questions than they have answers, and I think sometimes because I have pastor, as my job, There are people who think, I have all the answers. Let's go to Pastor Ken. He has all the answers. And I'll be honest with you. There are times where I will say to people, I don't know. I don't know why you had that loss. I don't know why you went through what you went through. I don't know what you do. I don't know. But let's pray about that together. But I do know this. I'll walk with you through it. I'll help you through it. So I'm okay with saying I don't know. Because sometimes, honestly, I don't know. I don't know. But that's something that pain taught me. So when we look at Joseph, and we look at someone who navigated pain in a powerful way, I'm praying that we will be able to do the same thing as well. So that way, there's this point where Jesus says something really profound. There's this woman who happened to show up, and she was washing the feet of Jesus with her tears and her hair. And the people that were around Jesus were saying, if he just knew. If he knew the woman that was touching him, he would never let her touch him. If he knew. And Jesus was able to pick up on that. And then Jesus shared some things with them. But then Jesus says this, and I think this is really powerful. He said, he who is forgiven much loves much. He who is forgiven much loves much. This is why I talk grace so much at our church. Because you've been forgiven much. That's the point of grace. You've been forgiven much. And we're going to end this message talking about grace in a little bit as well. Here's how 2 Corinthians puts it. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 4 through 6. He comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort others. When they are in trouble, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us. For the more we suffer for Christ, the more God will shower us with comfort through Christ. Even when we are weighed down with troubles, it is for your comfort and salvation. For when we ourselves are comforted, we will certainly comfort you. Then you can patiently endure the same things we suffer. You know the beauty of learning how to process pain well? Is we become a resource that God can use. We really do. We become a resource of comfort. We become a resource of hope. We become a resource of faith. We become a resource of grace. We become a resource that benefits the lives and the hopes of others. So this is why this next point is really important, and that is we need to learn to live the hardship of our story without letting it write the script of the rest of our lives. That's the next point. Is we need to learn to live the hardship of our story without letting it write the script of the rest of our lives. So again, that is something that was in the devotional. I thought, oh my goodness, that's gold. Because we do the opposite, don't we? We let our hardship write the script of the rest of our lives. We let our pain and our hardship write the story of our struggles, write the story of our disappointments, write the story of how we process things in the future, write the story of our relationships, write the story of our future, write the story of our responses, write the story of our dreams. We let the pain of our past write our story. And so what God is challenging us to do is to really begin to look at changing that. And so what God does is what we call flip the script. He changes it. He rewrites it if we will allow him to. If we will allow him to. And so this is what Joseph does, which is so powerful. This is what he does that is so powerful. In Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 through 21, it says, "But Joseph replied, 'Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you?'" So basically what happened is his brothers had reached out to him, and they were kind of like playing the thing, because they were afraid of Joseph now that their dad is dead, that Joseph was going to exact revenge. And so this is his response to that. You intended me harm. This is really important. You intended me harm, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children. So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. So here's my encouragement. And this is really important. I want to encourage you to not make the same mistake that I have made in my life. I have been someone who's stuck in my pain. And I have been someone who has allowed the pain of my past to dictate the way that I live my life. I have been someone who has allowed the pain of my past to dictate the way that I see me, my gifts, my talents, my abilities. And I've had to learn how to push past that. As I was writing this sermon, I realized something. I realized I don't love myself. I don't. And part of that realization came as I was writing this down, and I could tell you what I said to God. I said, bro, I want to talk about them, not me. But I don't want to sugarcoat it for you either. In counseling, and talking to my therapist is what helped me to also come to that realization that, because many of you know that in my past I was sexually molested, and then also I've wrestled with abandonment issues because of my past, and never went through counseling as a kid to really deal with it, and I've had to try to learn how to navigate it as an adult. And the weird thing was, I thought I had processed it. I thought I had moved forward. I thought, but then in counseling, I said some things about myself. And that's when my counselor said, "You don't love yourself, do you?" I was like, "What? You don't love yourself?" And let me ask this question. Do you even like yourself? Do you even like yourself? And so preparing this message kind of brought that conversation back to mind. And it just kind of reminded me, and I'm sharing this because I'm hoping that it will help you to be able to identify what are the things that have me stuck? What are the things that have me in this place? Because it's interesting to me that Jesus tells us to love our neighbor as we love what? Ourselves. And I'm wondering if so many of us are bitter, angry people because at our core, we've allowed the pain of our past and the actions of others to dictate what we feel about ourselves. And so what we really want to take out on ourselves, we take out on other people because that's more comfortable. Isn't it? It's easy for me to judge you than judge myself. It's easier for me to hold a stick and a candle to your life to see how you don't match up than to hold it to myself. Because if I hold it to myself, I might not like, and the truth is, I don't like what I see. So I think that that's where it's so important for us to seek healing and growth in our lives. And it kind of took Joseph and going through his life for me to really be able to see it. Because here's what Joseph said. Joseph said, what you intended for harm, God intended for good. What you intended for harm, what you intended to break me, what you intended to hurt me, what you intended to define me, what you intended to hold me back, what you intended to put me in a box, what you intended to put me in a self-imposed prison, God used it for good. God used it for good. So, what if we buy into that? What if we buy into that? What if we begin to say, I will not allow what has happened in my past to define my worth, my value, my gifts, my talent? I will not allow it to minimize what it is that I have to offer. I will no longer allow it to interrupt my dreams. What if we decided to move beyond our past? That is what we can learn from Joseph. And I love it because it really challenges us. And so with that, here's the thing that I want to encourage you as a point. With God's help and purpose, I will not let the hurtful actions of others define me or limit me. I'm no longer allowing that to happen. I am no longer allowing that to happen. I will not let your actions toward me limit what God can do. Again, going back to Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, again, Joseph said, you intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so that I could save the lives of many people. And here's the truth. And I'll tell you, the reality is that life is not fair. It's not. The pain that you dealt with and that you've had to navigate in your life is not fair. It's not. But let me tell you who understands it. It's Jesus. Jesus understands what it's like to suffer at the hands of people who are treating you unfairly. I mean, I wrote it this way. Let me see if I put it this way. He was unjustly arrested, unfairly tried, abusively beaten, and tortured to death. All of that. And he was what? Innocent. He was innocent. And he suffered at the hands of people who treated him unfairly. So, when you respond, it's unfair. This pain is unfair. This hurt is unfair. What they did to me was wrong. It was unfair. You know what Jesus says? I know. I know. I've walked through it too. And so I think it's important for us to realize what Jesus went through. Because maybe if we understand what Jesus went through, we can look at our Father differently. And we could be able to say that Lord, you understand that this is unfair. But, and there's always a but what you intended to harm me, God intended for good. And he said, I saved the lives of many people because of it. I saved the lives of many people because of it. So, here's the thing, and this is what I want to encourage you as well, is learn to see yourself through the lens of his grace instead of your pain. Learn to see yourself through the lens of his grace as opposed to your pain. That's what Joseph was able to do. That's what he was able to do. So what does grace do? I mean, think about this. What does grace do? Grace takes something that was broken and heals it. Grace takes something that was destroyed and rebuilds it. So rather than focusing yourself through the eyes of your pain, focus yourself through the eyes of his grace. And as I say this, Please don't take it as arrogance. But what if the person that intended to destroy me, the person that intended to break me, and the reality is some of the pain that we have in our lives is people doing some things intentionally, and sometimes people doing things unintentionally, right? Sometimes people do things unintentionally and hurt us too. But speaking of intentionally, speaking of our abusers, what better way to stick it to your abuser than to take how they tried to break you and use it to rebuild the lives of others? To take what they tried to use to define us and minimize us and limit us, that we take that and we say, God, I hand this over to you. And God, show me how to use this now to be able to help others. Show me how to do that. You know, I wonder, and I believe this, I think my pain was for this moment. I really do. Because there's someone in here who's suffering because of something that someone else has done to you, or something someone did not do for you. You're suffering. And you could take the pain of my abuser and you can use it for good. And God can use it to rebuild you. So let's all make this commitment that I will no longer be stuck in my pain. I have moved on. My pain does not have the final say. Let's begin to rehearse that. God, how can you use this? How can you use this for good? And I love it because when Joseph also describes it, he also describes it in such a way that it seems like God intended it for good, that I may save the lives of many others. Many others. So in other words, God used my pain beyond what I could even imagine what he's capable of. That's the expansiveness that Joseph attributed to what God has done. What you intended for harm, God intended for good. So what if that's what we do? And we are set free as a result of it. And we are set free as a result of it. So how can you begin to unleash his passion and his work in your life? How can you begin? You know, again, here at Encounter, one of the things that we want to encourage the people at our church to do is to be able to love God, love others, and love themselves. So we describe it as love up, love out, love in. And so we made a commitment that every message we will end in looking at those three things. And so with that, with these three principles, you could take one or you could take them all and decide how you want to implement them into your life. But here's the first one. Love up, loving God. See yourself through God's eyes, where you are defined by his love, not your struggles. See yourself through God's eyes, where you're defined by his love, not your struggles. Because I can tell you now, here's the truth. The way that you see you is the way that you think God sees you. I was wrong in the way that I thought God saw me. I didn't think I was worthy. So that's been my prayer. God, help me to see me as you do. And I'll be honest, I'm not even remotely close to there yet. I'm not. But I'm on this journey, and I pray that you will be too. Love out. Identify who you can use your pain to help. Identify who you can use your pain to help. Um, I've been volunteering with an organization called Young Life. And eventually my dream is, because right now we're focusing on West High School. That's where we're starting at here in Torrance. Eventually my dream is to hopefully be able to build that up enough to where I can maybe get a crew of people and begin to start doing some work at North High School, being able to connect there. So that's part of the reason why I'm connected there as well. But let me tell you the main reason why I'm doing it. The reason why I have a heart for teenagers is because of this. If at 17 years old, someone would have sat down with me and helped me to walk through my pain, I wouldn't have had to go through 38 years of suffering. Right? So that's why I'm involved in Young Life, because I want to have high school students, if they're in pain, to break through and be able to overcome it. So who can you help? Who can you help? Love in. Transform your pain into purpose, trusting that God can bring healing and hope through it. I am no longer letting you define me. So find purpose in it. Find purpose in it. God, how can you use this? How can you use this? Then let's step in. And let's allow him to do it. So I want to do something a little bit differently in the way that we end our messages. And so I want us to do a group prayer right now. So what's going to happen is I am going to put a prayer on the screen. It's a really, really simple prayer. But it is a prayer that can help us begin to find healing in our lives. So when I put it on the screen, then what's going to happen is we will read that prayer together. All right? All right. Jess, you want to go ahead and put it up? All right, here we go. God, show me how I can use my pain to help. Make that your prayer. God, show me how I can use my pain to help. Show me. Show me. I mean, just imagine this. Imagine being at a place with your pain that you can look at that and say, man, that did suck. It wasn't good. But also, look at the good that I was able to do as a result of it. Look at how many people I've been able to help. And let me tell you, even if the number of people that you were able to help is one, isn't it worth it? Is it worth it? For that one, it's worth it. Father, I thank you for the incredible love that you have for us.